U.S. President Donald Trump says he's terminating all discussions on trade with Canada.
We haven't really had a lot of luck with Canada. I think Canada could be one where they'll just pay tariffs.
After Ottawa confirmed it is moving ahead with a digital services tax aimed at major tech companies.
In early 2025, U.S. President Donald Trump dropped a bombshell. New trade tariffs targeting Canadian imports, including a sharp 10% duty on energy products. His administration promised tough stances on trade, but few expected the ripple effect it would set off just north of the border. While the US braced for retaliatory measures or more diplomatic friction, Canada did something far more impactful. It didn't shout, it shipped. On June 30th, 2025, Canada sent its first ever shipment of liquefied natural gas, LNG, directly to Asia, bypassing the US entirely. This wasn't just a routine trade. It was a symbolic departure from decades of energy dependence on its southern neighbour. For over 30 years, nearly every molecule of Canadian gas flowed through pipelines into the United States. That era is now ending. Before we dive in, if you're into clear, no-fluff breakdowns, hit like and subscribe. It helps more people find this, and we've got more deep dives coming your way. Let's get started. This move marks more than just a trade pivot. It signals a new phase of Canadian economic strategy, one that prioritises autonomy, flexibility and resilience in a fast-changing global landscape. And it wasn't done with retaliation or rhetoric. It was done with infrastructure, investment and vision. In today's world, energy isn't just fuel, it's leverage. And with one quiet voyage across the Pacific, Canada demonstrated that it's no longer content to play second fiddle in the North American energy dynamic. It's writing its own story, and it's only just begun. Kitimat, British Columbia, a small, remote town nestled along Canada's rugged Pacific coast, has now become ground zero for one of the most ambitious energy projects in the country's history. The LNG Canada terminal, a $40 billion mega-facility, roared to life in mid-2025 after nearly a decade of planning, construction and regulatory navigation. This terminal has redefined Canada's energy strategy. For decades, Canadian gas was trapped by geography and infrastructure. Its only viable route to global markets was through pipelines that fed directly into the United States. In 2024 alone, Canada exported around 8.8 billion cubic feet of gas daily to the US, a market worth roughly $8 billion. But that relationship came with risk. US infrastructure limitations, policy changes, and trade disputes constantly cast a shadow over Canada's energy revenues. That all changed with LNG Canada. This state-of-the-art terminal takes natural gas and supercools it to 165 degrees, converting it into liquid form. The result? Gas that once could only travel via pipeline can now be loaded onto massive ocean tankers and shipped globally. And the location gives Canada a huge edge. Unlike terminals on the US Gulf Coast, which must navigate the Panama Canal to reach Asian markets, Kitimat's deep-water port opens directly onto the Pacific. The time savings are significant, around 10 days to Northeast Asia, compared to more than 20 from Texas or Louisiana. The very first LNG cargo, carried by the tanker Gaslog Glasgow, charted a faster, more resilient route to Asia's booming energy markets. And with that single voyage, Canada broke free from a decades-long export dependency. It wasn't just a shipment, it was a declaration of independence. The global demand for liquefied natural gas is surging, and nowhere is that more evident than in Asia. Countries like Japan, South Korea and China are aggressively diversifying their energy imports to move away from coal and reduce dependence on politically volatile regions. For them, LNG isn't just a fuel, it's a lifeline. Japan, for instance, is ramping up its LNG import capacity by an additional 20 million tonnes annually as it shifts away from nuclear and coal power. South Korea is expanding its LNG storage infrastructure by 50% to ensure winter supply security. And China, already the world's fastest growing LNG market, has been locking in long-term deals with exporters around the globe in anticipation of future supply shocks. Into this frenzied market steps Canada, stable, resource-rich, and now directly accessible by sea. With its clean hydroelectric power, strict environmental regulations, and political reliability, Canada offers exactly what Asia's energy buyers are seeking: trustworthy, long-term supply with a lower emissions footprint. What gives Canada an edge isn't just its geographic proximity or environmental credentials, it's its timing. With many nations scrambling for alternative suppliers, Canada is offering fresh capacity at just the right moment. Buyers in Tokyo, Seoul, and Beijing are now eager to tap into Canadian gas not just as a commodity, but as a strategic hedge. In a world where LNG contracts often span 20 years or more, these early partnerships carry long-term implications. Canada has arrived on the world stage, and its entry has been perfectly timed to meet the world's needs. What truly sets LNG Canada apart from many global energy projects isn't just its engineering or its timing, it's who's included in the journey. At the heart of this project lies a new kind of partnership, one that's reshaping how energy development unfolds in Canada and possibly across the world. Most notably, the Haisla Nation, whose traditional territory includes Kitimat, is more than just a consulted party. They're equity stakeholders. Their investment in the coastal gas-linked pipeline that supplies LNG Canada marks a groundbreaking shift in Indigenous participation. It's not simply a share of benefits, it's ownership, governance, and decision-making power. For the first time in Canadian history, an Indigenous community holds a major stake in the infrastructure delivering energy exports to the world. But this wasn't just one symbolic agreement. Over $5.8 billion CAD in contracts were awarded to Indigenous-owned enterprises and local suppliers during the construction phase. More than 50,000 jobs were created nationwide, fueling employment not only in energy hubs, but also in remote towns and underserved communities. Local welding shops, trucking companies, food suppliers, and environmental service providers all shared in the economic ripple effect. What makes this model so powerful is that it's not an afterthought, it's part of the design. The approach focused on early consultation, shared benefits, and sustained engagement throughout every phase of the project. In contrast to previous resource developments that often sparked protest and litigation, LNG Canada advanced with relatively broad consent and collaboration. Globally, this is turning heads. International observers, especially in ESG-focused investment circles, see the project as a proof of concept that large-scale industrial development can proceed ethically and inclusively. This aligns with growing investor focus on environmental, social, and governance (ESG) metrics, where a project's social impact is as scrutinized as its financial returns. For Indigenous communities, this model offers a powerful tool for self-determination. Instead of watching projects reshape their land from the sidelines, First Nations like the Haisla are shaping those projects themselves, securing revenue, jobs, and infrastructure improvements while preserving their voice and culture. Critically, this is not charity. It's a mutually beneficial model that investors, governments, and Indigenous leaders now view as essential for long-term success. It represents a shift in power, economic, legal, and moral, that reflects a more just and modern Canada. If replicated thoughtfully, it could become a global benchmark for how to develop natural resources without sacrificing human dignity or community rights. As Canada celebrates the successful launch of LNG Canada, attention is already turning to what's next, and the competition is only heating up. Countries like Qatar, the United States, and Australia are aggressively expanding their LNG infrastructure. Qatar, for example, plans to push its LNG export capacity to 126 million tonnes annually by 2030, more than 4 times Canada's current output. Meanwhile, US exporters offer shorter, more flexible contracts and are backed by a vast pipeline of shale gas production and coast-to-coast infrastructure. For Canada to join the ranks of these heavyweights, it will need to act fast and smart. Phase 2 of LNG Canada, currently under consideration, would double the project's capacity to 28 million tonnes per year, potentially pushing Canada into the top 5 LNG exporters globally. This would be a massive leap for a country that had never shipped LNG overseas before mid-2025. However, expansion isn't a foregone conclusion. The second phase would require a massive infrastructure push, potentially twinned pipelines, new liquefaction trains, expanded marine facilities, and more deep-water berths to handle the increased shipping volume. Each of these elements would face regulatory scrutiny, engineering challenges, and financing hurdles. And financing is no small issue. With global interest rates elevated and investors increasingly cautious about large-scale fossil fuel projects, Canada will need to present a compelling case that Phase 2 is not only profitable, but also environmentally and socially responsible. Investors want assurance that projects won't be derailed by community opposition, lawsuits, or rising carbon penalties. That's where Canada might still have an edge. Its strong environmental record, transparent regulatory frameworks, and hydroelectric-powered infrastructure make Canadian LNG among the lowest carbon options globally. In an era where the European Union is implementing carbon border taxes, This could make Canadian exports far more attractive than LNG from regions that burn coal for power or flare methane during extraction. Still, timing is critical. Other countries are racing ahead with their own terminals, and new players, like Mozambique, Tanzania, and Eastern Mediterranean nations, are entering the fray with promises of lower costs and closer proximity to key markets. If Canada delays too long or gets bogged down in red tape, it could miss this golden window of opportunity. To win this race, Canada must not only scale up, but also scale smart, prioritising cleaner technologies, Indigenous equity, and strong stakeholder alignment. As Canada doubles down on LNG, a critical question looms. Can a country that champions climate leadership also be a major fossil fuel exporter? It's a dilemma that policymakers, project developers, and citizens are now grappling with in real time. Canada has publicly committed to ambitious climate targets, including net zero emissions by 2050. Critics argue that expanding LNG infrastructure runs counter to these goals, locking in decades of fossil fuel reliance and undermining progress on renewables. The LNG Canada terminal has earned praise for its low-carbon footprint, thanks largely to British Columbia's hydroelectric grid. But expansion could invite higher emissions if not meticulously managed. To navigate this tension, Canadian developers are pursuing a range of forward-looking solutions. Carbon capture and storage (CCS) systems are being evaluated to trap CO2 before it escapes into the atmosphere. Some firms are also experimenting with AI-powered leak detection, high-efficiency compressors, and real-time emissions monitoring to minimise methane loss and improve transparency. What's more, new proposals like Cedar LNG and Kasai Lisim's LNG, both Indigenous-led projects, aim to incorporate sustainability and partnership from the start. These ventures are building on the LNG Canada model, but looking to go even further, powering operations entirely with renewables, integrating climate resiliency planning, and offering full supply chain traceability. Yet even with innovation, public support will be essential. Canadians expect transparency, not just on emissions, but also on where profits go, how First Nations are treated, and whether promises made in boardrooms materialise in communities. The social licence to operate is not guaranteed. It must be earned and renewed continuously. International markets are watching closely too. As the EU, Japan, and Korea begin prioritising the carbon intensity of imported fuels, Canadian LNG could be priced competitively if it maintains its environmental edge. Certification systems that verify clean LNG may soon become industry standard, and Canada is well positioned to lead in that space. The stakes couldn't be higher. If Canada can grow its LNG sector while still hitting its climate targets, it could become the global blueprint for ethical fossil fuel exports, a bridge between today's energy needs and tomorrow's clean future. But that success depends on commitment, innovation, and a willingness to be held accountable. Canada's entry into the global LNG market is far more than a story about fuel. It's about national reinvention. What began as a defensive move against US trade tariffs has quickly evolved into a bold assertion of independence, strategy, and vision. For decades, Canada was tethered to a single buyer, reliant on US pipelines and policy whims. Today, it's steering its own course across the Pacific, reaching new markets and reshaping its economic future. The LNG Canada terminal is proof that a country can take control of its destiny not through confrontation, but through construction. By building infrastructure that opens doors, creates jobs, honours Indigenous partnerships, and answers the world's growing demand for cleaner, more secure energy. Still, this is only the beginning. The competition is fierce, the climate stakes are high, and the path forward is filled with regulatory, financial, and logistical hurdles. But with each cargo that departs from Kitimat, Canada sends a message. It's here to play on the world stage, not just as an energy exporter, but as a responsible, innovative, and inclusive energy leader. Whether this momentum becomes a sustained legacy will depend on how Canada balances ambition with accountability. If it succeeds, it won't just transform its economy. It will redefine what energy leadership looks like in the 21st century. Thanks for watching. If you found this useful, like the video and subscribe so you don't miss the next one. Drop a comment. I'd love to hear what you think.